This is Julie Fitzgerald, Vice President of Sales and Marketing from GuideK12. It's about 11:01, and we are excited to get started with the training. Thank you for attending. With me, I have Dan Ock, who heads up our customer experience and is our technical guru and all things. Many of you have probably met Dan before. Dan, are you out there?
I am. Good morning, everyone.
I am really excited about this, and so we'll just start with some logistics because we can see that there's quite a few people that are still logging in, and so we will just be a little bit patient here to get started. And some logistics. As you're logging in, we will keep the lines open as long as we don't have a lot of disruption or noise, background noise. We'll just keep it the way it is, so you can ask a question when you need to or type in the chat window when you want to ask a question. We want to make this interactive. One of the things is that the logistics or the application for each of you is already live. And so you've got some choices as we do this training. If you'd like to look at your own application and your own instance and be kind of following along with yours. If you've got two screens, that works great. Or if you just want to follow along with what Dan's walking through, that's a great option as well. We really want to emphasize too with the new modules and the things that we're going to show that with GuideK12 you do have unlimited users and role-based security. So this is a great time to open up the new applications and new users. So we do have 4 modules that make up the suite. We're going to talk about 3 today, but I do want to just do a quick reminder on if you don't have School Search, the address lookup tool on your website using GuideK12. Just want to make sure you know that you own it and you can take full advantage of that tool because it's really awesome for promoting your messages in your community. So Explorer is the first module that we upgraded, and some districts have it and some are getting it now along with the other modules. So as we go through that, some of that might be familiar training, but always good reminders as well. So with that, Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and it looks like you've got the screen, so I'll let you take it from here.
I do. Thank you very much, Julie. Yeah, that's a great introduction. It's important to note that some of you out there may have had Explorer, in its initial version for some time now. If you have, there are some additional new functionalities in the latest version of Explorer, so we'll certainly be going over that and making sure you're aware of what those changes are so that you can access them if you haven't already. So I want to first off start off by saying thank you for joining us. I know it's been kind of a long time coming for some of you being excited about the new upgrades, and it's great that they're finally here, and we're excited to show you what we have for you to work with now that we've expanded and kind of gotten through all of our product upgrades, as well as providing you with a new product called Advisor. And we're really excited about the capabilities of that product going forward as well, and that it will help you find even more value with your GuideK12 subscription. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at what we're going to be doing over the next hour and a half or so. I believe we've blocked off 2 hours. I'm not sure if we'll use up the whole time. We likely will, but if you can stay for the whole time, that would be great. We're going to try and cover as much as we can and give you as much training on the new functionality.
GuideK12 is tool we bought to do lookups for kids enrolling, registration gateway. You don't put an address in there. You get close and GuideK12 fills in. So he's using.
It sounds like we're hearing.
Every piece of the world, but you only put valid addresses in.
I'm going to go ahead and mute. Julie, are you able to control the muting?
I think you've got it.
Okay. All righty. So getting back to that, anyway, we're going to be going through, let's take a look at the kind of introductions and agenda for today. What's now included in GuideK12? As you're all familiar with, and Julie mentioned, you all have access to a School Search instance. Certainly, if you're not deploying that on your website for parents, realtors, etc., to go in and look up, let us know. We certainly want to make sure you're taking full advantage of all of your products in the suite. School Search replaced District View about 2 years ago for those of you who are customers since before then. We're going to be taking a look at the new Explorer application that replaces Student View. We'll also look at Planner, which is the upgrade to Enrollment View, and the totally new product called Advisor, which is there to kind of interface with Planner a little bit, but it's also standalone in that it'll let you create bar charts, line charts, pie charts, and thematic maps from your data streams that are configured in GuideK12. For the training, we're going to go through here, application by application, looking at the 3 primary internal applications. We'll look at Explorer first, then we'll delve into Advisor, the new product. Since Advisor has some capabilities where it interacts with Planner, I want to make sure you're fully aware of what Advisor is all about and what it can do before going into the Planner product. Also, for those of you that may not have a need to look at the improved Planner yet at this time because you may not be doing boundary plans, I want to make sure that we're cognizant of your time and get to Advisor, the new module, earlier on in the training. Okay. So let's dive right into things. We're going to go through each application again and do some training. I want you to be able to feel free to use your instance. I'm going to be using our demonstration instance, but since you all have access to your instances now, I would love it if you would open your instance and follow along as I'm doing things. A lot of us will have similar attributes since we ask for them by default. Again, others of you may have more detailed attributes, but you certainly can follow along to the extent that things are similar, and then you can start to play on your own. What's new in Explorer? If you were on the previous kind of overview demo that we had a while back, we kind of went over this, but I'm going to touch on some points again before we get into the product and take a look at the exact specifics and train it. We have some bigger map and better visual appeal overall. The map tools now have been moved on to the map and are more intuitive. Before they were kind of stuck over on the left-hand side, mashed in with some of the other tools, and it wasn't quite as intuitive to see that these map tools belong to functions on the map versus the filtering tools for filtering your data out. One of the biggest and best changes is the fact that we've gotten rid of the query without selection button. For those of you who have used Student View and Enrollment View, it kind of was a hassle at times. You had to really learn that to get that down, and you kind of had to hit that button more than you'd like to. Now we have a much more simple interface for that, and that is handled much cleaner. Overlays. By default, we've added overlays on the right-hand side of the application to allow you to be able to overlay outlines of your feeder patterns, for example. You want to have your elementary layer up, and then you want to also look at your middle school feeder patterns and your high schools. You are able to now toggle those on and off over. And I'll show you how that works in the application here shortly. Data streams. We're now introducing in Explorer something called data streams, which previously in Student View, it was really about the student. You could look at a little bit of parcel information, but you couldn't do much with it. Now, with new data streams, we can input other data streams. For example, community ed databases, voter databases, staff databases, anything that has an address, just like your student data. You can create a CSV text file, send it to us, and we can create those data streams and configure those filters separately for those data streams. The display of the dots or the point options on the map. So if you're looking at your student data, we now show multifamily dwellings much more clearly. We have a new packed point representation, we call it. So it kind of will show these pyramid shapes, which allow you to see all students at a given household. So even when there are multifamily settings such as a large apartments, if there's 50 kids there, you'll still see 50 dots representing their individual characteristics. Maps, we have new base maps, which now include satellite and hybrid views, as well as some additional Google map layers such as transit, the real-time traffic, and bicycle route maps. The summary window is more flexible and has more flexibility and options built into it. We'll talk about that when we're demoing it. And there is better exporting and output options. So let's move on to doing some training exercises with the new products.
And as Dan
Again,
is transitioning to Explorer, I would just encourage you to think about Explorer. To me, is kind of the sandbox of all the different things that are in your SIS or different data sets. And so I think of Explorer as the opportunity to really look at demographics, to analyze equity issues, to look at absenteeism, to look at even if you're tracking who has access at home, Wi-Fi access at home, if you're tracking that in your SIS, so you could see where there's digital deserts. There's just a lot of things that I think with this new tool, it opens up some new applications, whether you're using it in your community ed department or using it in, with your special needs or your program teams. It just opens up a lot of possibilities.
Thank you for that overview, Julie. So again, I encourage you to go ahead and open up your instance of Explorer and follow along as I go through all of the changes and the functionality in Explorer. So as you can see here, and I will also mention, this is actually our demonstration instance, which is a real school district in Minnesota. They've given us permission to use their likeness, so to speak, and we actually have some previous data from them that has been anonymized. What you're going to be looking at is data that was from a real district. So it's able to kind of model things much nicer and be a nice demonstration instance for you to follow along as we go through the training here. When you first start up Explorer, you're going to be presented with your main startup screen, which should go to the extent of your district boundary, and it should display all of your students in your, if you've opened your students data stream. One thing I will note to you is that when you log in, you're going to see a lot of new applications now. As we have multiple data streams loaded for your district, you will have multiple applications. They are really different applications, but can be toggled easily back and forth between them. So you may notice by default that you have two Explorer instances. One is for students, the other should be Explorer parcels. And those are just different data streams that have different attributes that were configured to be able to work with those data streams. So we're viewing the student data stream here, and that we can see from the very top green bar here next to your school district name, there's a view option. This is where, if you have multiple data streams, you'll be able to toggle between those and switch back and forth between the different user interfaces for the data streams. Let's take a look at the layout versus in Explorer versus what you may have been used to in Student View. We've tried to keep it very similar for ease of transition. You know, we felt the old interface was a really good interface, but just needed some additional tweaks and updates with a few enhancements. So this is our new interface for that. The left-hand side, you can see we have moved those map tools, which used to be in the top left. We have put them now all on the map. So we know that these tools specifically work with the map functions that we're going to be showing today. We have our filters now top left and right at the top part of our summary information window. This is again where we'll be able to work with configuring the different attribute filters that will select the features on the map. Below the filters area is that summary dashboard. You're all used to seeing that in Student View and Enrollment View. Again, this can be configured specifically for your district. So it's not at the user level, but it's at the district level where you can choose which summary attributes you want to show up here in the summary dashboard. That summary dashboard really is there to give you a quick dynamic view of your current selection and to allow you to export that data into either an Excel spreadsheet or a text file format, which is a comma-separated values file that can be used to import into other systems within your district if you so choose. But again, it's going to download a representation of this summary dashboard. And when we do some selections, we'll actually take a look at that. Right now, we're going to kind of go over all of the layout, and then we'll start getting into specific functionality. Again, you can choose as a district which attributes. I usually recommend 3 or 4 summary attributes. We also, by default, will include transfer status. If that's an important, it's usually an important attribute that we calculate based on where the student primary address is mapped. And so what it does is looks at the relationship of where the student resides in relation to their home area of enrollment and district of enrollment. So we have some kind of new classifications for Explorer. You can see here we have the home area enrolled students. These are students that are residing within their attendance area of the school they are currently enrolled at. We also have a transferring within the district, which is those students living in your district, attending district schools that are transferring to something other than their home area school.
Muted.
And then there's transferring into the district. If you're allowing open enrollment from other districts, we have a category to track that as well. And we've added the unknown location category. Before, as many of you know, when we weren't able to map or geocode a student to their address for some reason, they kind of got lumped in into other categories, and you didn't really know which students were not mapped. We now have an unknown location category that you're able to filter students out that weren't on the map or are not on the map. This is really helpful. Obviously, one, it's for transparency reasons. You want to make sure that you know how many students are not mapping if you're going to be making a decision based on data that is geographic in nature. But also it's there to help assist you with being able to, as usual, pull out a report of those students that we couldn't map and look at why their addresses might not be mapped. You know, is their address incorrectly put into the system? Is it missing addresses? Or maybe it's just that the address is too new and isn't in the county data. And you can notify us and let us know if that's the case, and we can do overrides manually on those locations to make sure that they map. Also, if transfer status isn't important to your district, let us know. We can remove that from your district's summary dashboard. In addition to the summary dashboard with Explorer, is not only do we have the count for the current selection, but we have a percent breakdown, which can be much more meaningful. If we look below that, we have a map by section. It's in a similar spot as it was before in your student view and enrollment view applications. You are still able to get at all of your configured attribute filters as map by options. As we change them, our map display will change accordingly.
Dan,
Yes, Julie.
Dan, can you explain the difference between map by and filter?
Yes, so absolutely. If we're filtering, we're going to be actually weeding the map down based on characteristics. So we'll be able to hone in on a very select set and only visualize those dots on the map. The map by simply controls the characteristic that we want to visualize those dots by. So in this case, we're doing school of attendance. We'll be doing changing the map by in various functions to show you again how that map by can be very useful when filtering and wanting to visualize a specific characteristic on that selection. A major improvement to the map by is previously the map by did not have statistics. It did not have the counts or the percent breakdown. So now with the combination of the summary dashboard as well as the map by having counts and percent, you're able to get at a statistical breakdown of any attribute in your left-hand panel, either by the map by or the summary content area. Okay, so that's the left-hand panel. There is an export button at the bottom, and we'll get more into that once we do some selections, but you have some different options here from the export dialog that we'll take a look at in just a moment. I mentioned also again previously that we moved the map tools. They are now on the map so that they're more specifically related to the functions that you're going to be using on the map. We have also added some additional features that we'll talk about in detail when we start training the functionality. We've got undo and redo buttons, as well as some more control over the shapes that we're able to select and draw on the map. On the right-hand side, we have our area where we can change our base map, our different travel layers, and our school types where we can toggle between the different levels within your district. We also have a button now for an overlay. So if you were used to the map tab before, now the map tab has been moved into an overlays dialog where we can control which map layers we're seeing on the screen and be able to toggle on their geometries as well as labels if available. And at the bottom, we also have our ability to turn the dot distribution map or the dots on the map on or off, and to change different visualizations, which we will cover in the training as well. As usual, we have a quick zoom to district button in case you want to zoom back out to full district extent. And the last piece of the functionality that's kind of been moved here is the search bar. We have a search bar now on the top across the green header. The search will allow you to search for school building names, students, addresses, and it will search across multiple data streams if you have them loaded, so that you can use them to cross-reference one another. So let's get into taking a look at how we work with the new functionality and the new layout in GuideK12. I'm going to go ahead into the upper left here into the filters dialog, and we have a configure attribute filters button that will bring up a dialog that has been designed similarly to how it was in student view. On the left-hand side, we have all of the attribute categories configured for your district. On the right-hand side, as we click on each category, we see the different values that we have to choose from that are configured for that attribute. If we're wanting to find a particular subset or filter a subset of students, we can start to filter. Let's say we want to filter on certain grade levels, kindergarten, first, second grade. We check the check boxes, and we just click the Finish button. This is where we remove the query without selection. Before, you had to click the Apply Filters. You had to come back if you didn't have geography selected, and you had to click Query without selection. We've now removed that constraint or limitation. So filtering is much easier. All of your drawing or all of your map navigation, such as panning, zooming, etc., all the same. We still have the same capabilities from the last product, right down to being able to use your Shift key, do a left click, and draw a box to zoom in precisely to an area. On the left-hand side, you can see we do have zoom sliders and a plus or minus button here if you're wanting to use those tools as well. Of course, you can always continue to use your scroller wheel. Also, double-clicking a location on the map will zoom in one level and center on that location. So all of the previous functionality for that is still available. Let's take a look at the visualization of the points. I talked about a new way we visualize the student dots previously in your other applications. All of the students that were located at the same household or same address had dots that were stacked on top of each other. We may have had different shapes representing those locations, triangles, squares, and circles, so you could kind of get an idea where there were multifamily dwellings. We've now made it much, much clearer. We can see here on this area that I'm showing, I see a big kind of a honeycomb pattern here down by just to the west of Tulip Street Northwest. That signifies a higher number of students that were geocoded to that location. If we zoom down in, we can see it looks like there's an apartment building of some sort. If we wanted to, we could also look at the hybrid map, and that's going to really give us that detail about what's underneath. And if we're in our navigate tool mode, the tools up at the top here are blue when they're not being used. If they are the active tool, they'll be highlighted in green. So right now I'm in navigate mode, which means I can zoom, pan, move the map around, and also identify the dots on the map. If I were to just click in this cluster, we're going to get a quick listing of all of those students at that location with a preview of the attributes. Now, each of your previews can be configured individually to your district needs as well. So if there are certain attributes from all of them you are currently sending us, you can let us know which attributes you need to add, or if you want to remove any from the preview, and we can do that. Again, this is just a preview. It's going to show you up to 100 selected students. From there, you're able to use some different output options. Excel being one of the most common ones. If we were to click Excel, we're going to notice a confidential data notice is going to come up and let us know there could be PII in that data set. So we put up a little warning. You can choose to not show that in the future by unchecking the show this message again. It's going to go ahead and create your Excel download. If it, depending on how your browser is configured, it may come up on the bottom. You may have to open it, or it may just open directly into Excel. And now we can see we have an output into Excel format. And it should contain all of the attributes that you originally provide in your nightly upload of that data stream. So again, if that's not the case, let us know. We can always add those in. But they should be by default exporting all fields. CSV format, again, is a text file format. That's many times can be used to, say you have a selected set that you want to target for a communication. You may want to use your district's communication tool to do that. You can export to CSV format, and then that CSV file can be used to import into your mass communication tool to select by the student IDs. The SHP is called a shapefile format. For those of you who are familiar with GIS data, that can be exported into a GIS format for use in other systems or with consultants or whatever need you may have for that GIS mapping data. And as always, we still have our mailing label capabilities. We can choose from our 3 Avery label styles and who we want to address those labels to. Again, it's pretty important to note again that when you're showing those students or previewing those students by clicking on the map, it's important to note that there is a tolerance in pixels, so that if I'm zoomed out a little ways, I need to be careful. If you really want to use the export option on that preview screen, you'll want to make sure you're zoomed in pretty tight. If I were to click in an area out here, I'm not going to be that precise about knowing exactly which student dots were selected. So if you want to make sure you're really zoomed in, or better yet, if there's a certain characteristic that you're looking for in that selected set, you would use the attribute filters. So in this instance, let's zoom down into a group or cluster And I'll use these over here in the multifamily complex. We've got a couple of different dots here. If I wanted to, again, if I wanted to export everybody in there, I could go zoom in tight and do that export. But in this case, let's say I'm just looking for their school of attendance. In this case, Tully Elementary. I would want to make sure that rather than just identifying that I'd go into the filters and also add the appropriate filter to select just those students attending Tully Elementary. Now we can see all of the dots just represent those students attending Tully. And now, if I just wanted this area, I'd click on it and get my preview. Or if I'm looking for all of those students in that filter, we can go down into our export tools, bring up the current selection dialog. Again, it's identical to your preview window, but now it's using the entire filtered data set. If we look over to our dashboard, we can see here in the summary dashboard that we are showing 233 students, and it's telling us that they are filtered. And we have a red box highlighted around the configure attribute filters. That tells us we have attributes being filtered on. Again, this preview window then will allow you to export to your different formats. Some additional enhancements to the filters dialog. You'll notice that we have a couple of kind of toggles or switches next to the filters. The attributes toggle allows you to quickly switch between full data mode or filtered mode. So if I just wanted to get a feeling in a particular area, what it looked like in full mode versus filtered, or just work with the data in full mode again, I could toggle that switch off, and now you can see we are showing all students, 38,387. But it remembers the filter settings so that if we want to toggle those filters back on, we can easily do so. I'm going to zoom to the full district again using the zoom to district button. I'm going to go ahead and open the configure attribute filters. You'll notice that they're very clear in showing us where we have selected categories or selected values. Fields that, or filter fields that have values selected will have a green check mark in them. Also underneath here, we have a summary of what we are currently filtering on. The last place that will allow you to see that transparency of what you're filtering on is with the notepad here next to the configure attribute button. You can click that button and it will tell us what our current filter settings are. I'm going to go ahead and clear all of our filters. So again, you'll have, in your instance, you'll have many of these attributes that we're working on. Many of them are defaults, such as special ed, free and reduced, the ELL or ESL classification, ethnicity, and so on. Again, the values are specific to your district. Maybe you have special ed codes completely detailed out, which gives you the ability to be very granular about which special ed classifications you're looking for. We also have some additional stuff in here that's not standard across our defaults. I certainly, and Julie will reiterate this, we want you to be thinking about other attributes that are important to your daily work that you do at the district, where you might want to filter out students on other characteristics. And here you can see we have some information on AP courses that students are taking. We also have some attributes, and you're going to see these possibly show up in your instances as well, attributes that we create based on our product. We've already talked about transfer status. That's the one where we calculate based on where the student resides in relation to the district boundary, their home attendance areas, and so on. Well, you can see a couple others in this set where we have configured the home value for the student, as well as whether it's homestead. And homestead in this case means they're not renters, they own the property, or their parents own that property. So we've done what we call a custom link across data streams, where the parcel data stream has tax roll data such as home values, this homestead classification. It could have other attributes that might be important to your district. And we create a custom link that really cross-references the students with that other data stream, in this case, the parcels. And we're able to attach the attributes from the other data stream so that we can filter students by that attribute. So if we wanted to go in here and filter students in a particular range, and these ranges are customizable to each district. We do have a default that we start out with for you, but you can customize that to your needs. As we know, home values throughout the country vary. And so let us know if you do have home values available to you in your instance and you want to change those ranges. Let us know what those ranges are and we can do that for you. I'm going to go ahead and filter out. I've cleared my other filters. I'm just going to go ahead and filter out for the students residing in the less than 100,000 or the 100 to 200,000 range. And again, these are based on the tax roll estimated market values that come in the data that we collect from your local county. Now we can get a breakdown here in our dashboard of our selected set, and we can take a look at what that breakdown is. If we were interested in that, again, that summary or aggregate look, we could take a look at that and output it to our Excel spreadsheet. And again, now we're going to see that we simply have a representation of that summary dashboard with the counts included. Now we could certainly also use our map by to change from the default to school of attendance. Maybe we want to take a look at this by special ed and see if we can look for any clusters. One thing I want to point out is some visualization options we now have. So by default, we have it using what's called a scaled packed point. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out to the district. When we're zoomed out a long ways, with our new packed point representation, it can be difficult at times, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off some labels as well so we can see the map a little clearer. When we're zoomed out further, it can be difficult to tell with our new packed point representation what is what and to visualize those dots using the map by. So the scaled packed point tries to make that easier to visualize, something more intuitive and more realistic to what you're wanting to see. In that, if we look on the left-hand side, we can see right now one dot is less than or equal to 3.95 students. So what it's doing is aggregating students within a proximity and combining them into a single dot. And it's using that map by characteristic still to do that so that you can visualize and still see those clusters if there are clusters. Might be easier if we take a look at, let's see if we can take a look at it by ethnicity. So that one gives us a little bit better view where we're still able to make something out at this level. Now, as I zoom in, you're going to continue to see that the scale on the left-hand side continues to decrease. So I zoomed in one level and I'm now down to one dot equals less than or equal to 1.71. And after I zoom in far enough, we're going to see that I'm actually down to one dot equals one student. So pretty quickly you get back down into that one dot equals one student, but we really try to keep that map clean by auto scaling those packed points. We do have other additional options. If you wanted to see full packed points at a level and it's not showing you full, you can go back to just doing a normal packed point. We also have added an option for going back to our default mode, which is if you only care to see a dot at a particular, well, a single dot at an address, just to know that you do have a student or students at a particular address and want a clean map, we can change it to the stacked point representation. You can see how this gives you a much cleaner map. However, it will remove the map by from really doing its intended job, depending on which characteristic you're looking at, because now we're stacking those dots back on top of each other, one on top of another. The other option is called a pie cluster. A pie cluster is meant to kind of give you a very general overview, but quick access to see where you might have higher proportions of one characteristic over another. So as we can see, if I change the pie clusters here, it's going to aggregate these students in areas and create a pie chart. It'll show you the number that pie chart, the number of students that pie chart is representing. And we're able to take a look at clusters from a further out distance at a much easier to see visualization. Maybe we wanted to look to see if we could pinpoint higher proportions of free and reduced. And what's nice about the pie cluster is as we zoom in, it continually updates those to get more precise and more precise with each zoom level so that you can really hone in on those specific areas. To the point where once we start getting down to this level, we're getting to the household level, even with pie charts or pie clusters. I'm going to switch back to the default scaled packed points. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out to the full district. I'm going to toggle off. We have an option to toggle off those student dots down in the filter overlays section as well of the overlays dialog. What I'm going to do here is talk about the new option we've added inside the overlays dialog, which is this school boundary section. Previously, you couldn't easily do feeder pattern visualization on top of each other layer. As you know, when we toggle between our different levels, the polygons are in different shades of colors, and we couldn't overlay multiple polygons of shades over each other and make a good representation. So what we've done now is we've added outline layers for you to be able to do that. So by default, you're going to have your elementary school zones and your elementary school boundaries with a blue. You can see there's a blue outline that kind of really helps to visually define where those color changes are. But more importantly, we can look at our other levels on top. So here we could take a look at our middle school boundaries, on top of our elementaries, as well as we can put our high school boundaries on top of those middle school outlines as well. So you can see here we have red high school boundaries overlaid on top of the blue middle school boundaries, which are on top of the main level that we're on, the elementary boundaries. So visualization of those is much easier as well. You also may have a district boundary outline in your application as well. As with the previous map tab, you are able to control all of these layers again. The left-hand checkbox will turn on the geometry or the features on that map. The right-hand checkbox controls labels if labels are available. And so we could turn off if we wanted to make a very simple map of the district without roads and underlying clutter, we could turn off the base map and control those features that we want to show up. One thing to note with the labels are meant to come on dynamically, and they're meant to try and represent not only the point or the school point, so in this case we can see all of these school points are being labeled with their names, but as we zoom on in, and it becomes important to look at, if we're looking at which boundary are we in, it's also now going to start labeling the boundary. You'll notice we do have the zone label checked on, and once we zoom in far enough, the zone labels will appear. As you zoom out and the map begins to get too cluttered, those labels will turn off automatically. So back to filtering, I'm going to go ahead and clear all of my filters and bring back the entire student population. And we're going to take a look at featuring by spatial characteristics. So now the map tools have been moved over to the map here itself. By default, we have some drawing tools, and the default drawing tool, which you probably will use most, is the draw polygon. If you were to click on the drop down arrow though, to be efficient with the map space and not covered up with too many tools, we have a little drop down arrow. If you click that, you'll be able to access your draw point, draw polygon, and draw line tools. So all of your drawing tools are still there. They're just a little bit more efficient about when you use them. I'm going to go ahead and use the draw polygon tool, and we're going to talk about some major differences and improvements in the draw polygon tool, or drawing tools in general. I'm going to go ahead and do my drawing as usual. Again, it's the same functionality as previously in Student View. A left mouse click and release to start a vertex point, and then continue to click left and release to have additional vertex points. To close it, we can either double click at the previous point before it if that shape is good, or we can go to the point of beginning, and when you see that blue circle snap to the point of beginning, you can do a single click. Either way, whether you close it by double clicking or the single click at point of beginning, you'll get a highlighted yellow, the yellow and orange highlight, which is consistent with what it looked like in your previous products. And you'll now see that we have filtered on just the geography. One major improvement is now, if you recall, you had to use there was some panning tools in the up left of the old products where if you wanted to scroll the map or pan the map or zoom it, you had to use those tools, and it was not very easy to do. Now, when you're in drawing mode, if you click and drag, as long as you hold, you're going to pan the map. So you can actually move the map, and I can zoom in while I'm still in draw mode. Also, we don't have to hit the edit drawn shape tool any longer. Now, if we're in the drawing tool, so if I'm in my draw polygon tool and I have a polygon on the map, and I get close to that, if I go to a vertex, it's going to snap to a vertex, which I can adjust by clicking and holding down and dragging to a new location. If I want to get more precise about my selection, I can it'll snap to any part of that line, and I can add new vertex points. And as I do so, you're going to see that the map automatically, or the selection, continues to update in real time. So editing is much easier. Again, I can zoom, I can pan, and work with the same tool all in one shot. I no longer have to jump back and forth clicking on zooming tools or panning tools to do edits to geography and refine them. Another major improvement is the fact that we can now draw multiple shapes. Previously in Student View, if you drew a new polygon, as you knew when you completed that polygon, the previous polygon would delete and you'd have a new single selection. Now we can select multiple non-contiguous areas for analysis. I'm going to go ahead and draw a third polygon. And so now we can see we have a selected aggregation of all three polygons that have been drawn. We have some new tools to work with those polygons now so that we can manage them. We have some delete options. One is a garbage can, which says delete all. If you just want to erase your map and start over without geometry being selected, you can click the delete trash can. And I'm going to go ahead and do that because I'm going to show you that if I made a mistake and said, oops, I didn't want to do that, we actually have an undo button to get those back. So these undo and redo buttons will work with your geometries that you've drawn on the map. So if you make a mistake, don't fret. You're able to do an undo and get that back. Say I just wanted to delete one or two of those shapes. We have a pencil eraser tool, which says delete one. We can activate that tool. And when we hover over a polygon, you'll notice it highlights blue. Once it's highlighted, we can click on that shape to remove it from the selection. Again, remember, the highlighted tool is in green is active. So at this time, I'm still active on my erase tool. Make sure if you've got the selection you wanted and are going to go back into using other functions that you click back over onto the navigate tool and activate the navigate tool. Or if you want to get back to your drawing, you can activate the drawing tool once more. Okay, so that's your basic drawing polygon tool and some of the new tools that we've added to manage shapes on the screen. Let's take a look at what else has changed from a drawing perspective and what has stayed the same. Some of you, I'm sure, have used the advanced tools where you could use the features in the map to select students. We can still continue to do that. I'm going to go ahead and click my delete all button and bring all the students back. And I'm going to open the advanced options. So now that used to be a separate area on the left-hand side. It's now a tool on the map. When I open that advanced options dialog, you can now see we have our layer buffer selections that we had previously. In addition to that, we also have an invert selection, which I'll show once I do some selections here. I'm going to start with the layer option. Again, it works identically to the way it did in student view. You can choose the drop down which layer you want to choose from. And again, you can use any layer that's configured in the overlays dialog to be a selectable layer to be used in the advanced options. I'm going to leave it at elementary school areas. I'm going to toggle the checkbox on next to layer. And if you recall, we just need to be able to give it some geometry on the map so that the product knows which features to use. Again, we could use any of the three tools if we wanted to select just a single area. I find that the draw point tool is the easiest to use. Now that we can select multiple features, we don't need to draw lines that touch areas or polygons that touch multiple areas. We can simply click inside of a zone. It's going to go ahead and select that zone. One thing that I'm going to point out, since this is a great example, is that if you have non-contiguous attendance areas, such as the case here with Jostin Elementary, you can see even though I clicked in one school, it knew there was another non-contiguous polygon that was associated to Jostin Elementary. This is our default setup so that you can select an entire multi-part attendance area with one click. If in your district you have non-contiguous areas and you find yourself wanting to have separate selections, we can configure it a different way to allow you to just click on one part of that multi-part attendance area and only get that. So you would let us know if you wanted to change that configuration. By default, again, we go with this area this way. That way it's making sure that people that may not be as familiar with what they're clicking on are going to make sure they select the entire attendance area, even when they're non-contiguous.
Dan, one of my favorite
Yes,
features is you just selected Jostyn with the point tool. One of my favorite tools is, and it showed in the left-hand side in the summary, how many students are in Jostyn. But if I wanted to now just slide over to another zone, like if I wanted to just slide over to the Brown School above Jostyn, can you show me how I take that magenta dot and move it over?
Yeah. So just like we were doing with the draw polygon tool, we also can adjust the points or line features we've drawn. So in this case, I've got a point. If I want to shift that and just move it to another polygon, I can let it snap. You'll see when I get close, it snaps to that magenta dot. I can click, hold, and drag to the new location I want to drop it, and it's going to go ahead and select that other polygon. So now we're selecting a different polygon by just moving and dragging that magenta dot.
Because if you would have just clicked on the brown, it would have added it. But because you moved the dot, it changed the selection area, which I think is really cool.
Right. And to go along with that, again, if we wanted to analyze multiple attendance areas, we can just simply put a dot in those attendance areas that we want to aggregate into the selection. And you can see now I've put one into Yarrow Elementary, and it's starting to aggregate those. I could go up here to Forest Hills and select that one, and it's going to continue to aggregate those into the selection. And I can again manage.
I find that I use that a lot for quick comparisons between schools, of being able to quickly look at it, move the dot, and get the summary from building to building to building. It's a very quick way to compare buildings by just sliding that magenta dot from one spot to the next, and it gives you a pretty good comparison tool with that by using that advanced layer. The other thing, Dan, that you were talking about earlier is in the overlays, the idea that you could be looking at your base map of elementary school boundaries, but you could overlay your middle school boundaries, and then you could select your middle school layers, and now you can very quickly get quantitative data for feeder patterns.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, a really, really cool application.
Yeah, in fact, to that point, we can actually just change our drop down. If that point we clicked on the map is still our point of interest, we can just change our drop down to middle school areas. I have toggled on the middle school boundaries, but we wouldn't need to necessarily. And now we can see we're now selecting on middle school boundaries overlaid on top of elementary boundaries.
And then we can further, that same concept of then now you can move around within the middle school boundaries, but see all the elementary kids that would feed into that pattern, which I think is really powerful.
Maybe we want to take a look at our fifth graders who are going to be sixth graders at the middle school next year. So we go into our filters, we choose fifth grade, and we do a selection based on that. I seem to be running into a little bit of a lag here in redraw with the GoToMeeting, which tends to happen. So hopefully it's refreshing decent for people, but it does seem to be a little bit on the laggy side right now. So I apologize. Again, hopefully you're all able to use your instances and kind of follow along and be doing this with your data while I'm doing this, so that you can see the same thing I'm doing, but using your data to do so. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear my map. I'm going to see if I can get this lag to go away.
Dan?
Yes.
one of the questions that's come in is, can you measure distance? Can you show us the buffer and how you can measure distance using that buffer tool?
Yeah,
that
so
works.
we don't just, yeah, we don't have a tool where you can just click and draw lines and measure a distance at this point, but we do have the radius tool, which is part of the next selection sets that I was going to get to, and that's using the buffer option within the advanced option. So the buffer option is going to allow us to kind of measure distance from a point or from a line. Even polygons can be buffered. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the draw point tool. I'm going to check the box for buffer, and I'm going to leave it at 1 mile. I'm going to go ahead and click a location. And zoom down in here so we can see that 1 mile buffer that we're going to create. And it's going to select those students based on that buffer distance we specified in the advanced options. Something that's important to note too, within our map by, which is really nice now, previously in the map by in the summary, it would list all schools of attendance or all attributes for a configured map by characteristic. Now, when we filter, we're only going to show you categories that actually have results for that category. So you can see down here, we're now down to 7 elementary schools in this selection, rather than showing a complete list where there are no students selected in our current set. So the dashboard or the map by area has been cleaned up considerably, especially for you larger districts that have a lot of schools. You're able to find now your information much quicker without having to scroll down the left-hand panel so much. Again, I can click that point and drag it to a new location and quickly
The other
get
thing
to
I
my
want to point out, I just want to point out while Dan has that buffer on the screen, this is where a lot of emergency communication departments and like this, because if there is an instance the buses can't go into that area because there's been a water main break or a gas leak or something's going on in that area, you can identify all the students from all grades or select whatever level of students you want within that buffer, and you can export it. But the other thing is the button under the buffer is the invert selection, which tells you everybody outside of that selected area, which becomes also very important from a communication perspective, because sometimes we want to inform everybody that's affected, but we also want to inform everybody that's not affected, so we don't have a lot of phone calls of panic to the district or people just tying up the phone calls with information when the communication could have gone out through an auto dialing system or something. So I always like invert selection.
Yep, I've toggled that on, and we can now see the dots are showing up outside those circles, not inside. So now you can get at both directions. You could not do that previously. And again, as I can change my buffer distances by going into this, the distance text area, and then simply tabbing out. Once I tab out, it's going to go ahead and change that distance and redo the selection automatically. And we're spending a good deal of time in Explorer. Explorer really is the basis for all mapping functionality throughout GuideK12. So it really sets the stage for working with not only Explorer, but Planner, which uses the same interface, as well as Advisor, which has the mapping component to be able to filter on the geography side of things still, as well as make bar charts and pie charts and such. So we're spending a good chunk of time. And
go ahead. I was just going to, Dan, ask you to talk about one more thing before you transition. Is up in the upper right-hand corner is the settings. And can you talk about what is saved each time? And that's how, if I log back in, what do I see And if I don't want to be seeing what I was working on before, what do I do? Because if I log back in, will I see what I had on the screen before, or how does that work?
Certainly. Let me finish up with the advanced options dialog real quick. There's another important feature to note. Previously with the advanced tools, there were times when users would get confused because they might collapse or close that advanced tools area, and they might not know they have a tool selected and they weren't getting the right selection. So we've made an improvement that basically says if I'm choosing selections based on the advanced options, this dialog box is going to stay open as long as that tool is, one of these checkboxes are on. So I can't close that dialog by clicking the advanced options tool. That way it kind of lets you know, hey, you can clearly see we've got a buffer selected. Now if I remove the buffer, I can close that dialog and clear my map up again. Okay, moving on to the 3-bar settings area, we kind of have some other information in here, and let's talk about the settings. There's going to be an option to clear my settings. What that's going to do is that's going to clear the cache that gets maintained while you're in your session. Your session will keep control of all of your overlays that you have on or off. It will remember where your current attribute filters are set. So if I were to lose internet connectivity or to quit the application or something happened or crash the not the application, the browser crashed, and you come back, when you come back into GuideK12 and come back into Explorer, it will remember all of those settings. That is, if you don't clear your cache completely and if you don't use the clear my settings. So all of those things that you've done in the overlays dialog and the filter settings, even your drawings, if you've drawn shapes, it will come back to those if you log out and leave those there. It will remember your map extent and where you're zoomed to on the map, as well as your map by settings. The reason we have clear my settings is on occasion, sometimes when there's data refreshes, major data refreshes or major code changes, sometimes the application needs to be, that cache does need to be cleared. So there's a clear my settings option. I'll even do it here because we're kind of at the end of our Explorer presentation. It's going to go ahead and ask if I'm really sure. I click OK, and you're going to notice that it's going to reload. You may get the disclaimer again. And now I'm going to be back to scratch. Dialogs are cleared. So, you know, again, you can use it anytime you just want to get back to reset. Or if you're having problems and something just doesn't seem to be displaying right, try that option first. What we're going to do next is we're going to go over, and I'm going to go back to our presentation here. And we're going to move over into Advisor, the completely new application at this point. What can you do with Advisor? You can do simple bar charts, line charts, pie charts. You can also report on longitudinal data and look at data over time. We're able to use different vintages, and we'll talk a little more detail about vintages. We're going to have school year vintages, which are vintages that can be snapped on an annual basis, and you can provide them historically going backwards in time if you would like to. We're using an Advisor. We have our current vintage, which is the Explorer. If you're automated, it's the previous day's student data. And then we have your monthly vintages, which we snap on the first of every month. We also will have scenario vintages that get created from your boundary planning scenarios using Planner. And all of those different vintages can be used to do longitudinal reporting in Advisor. Advisor and Planner talk to each other for advanced reporting and analysis. We also have thematic mapping. We'll talk about what that is and how it works. and the different output options that you have available to you. All right, I'm going to go over to Advisor. When you come into Advisor for the first time, this is what you're going to be seeing. You're going to have a blank screen area where you're used to seeing a map. Again, this product does not have to have the map component to it, but it does for being able to spatially filter and do things that you can't do or wouldn't be able to do with other tools such as pivot charts in Excel spreadsheets. You certainly can create bar charts and graphs and such in there, but you really would have a hard time doing the spatial geographic filtering component. You'll notice here we have a new drop down at the top. We call it the focus for the analysis, but it's really simply your different data stream views and allows you to use those data streams from Explorer. So you'll notice we do have our same data streams available in Advisor that we had in Explorer. I'm going to stay in the student data stream, and I'm going to talk about our analysis or document types that are available. These 4 buttons across the top analysis dialog here. We have bar charts, which is kind of the default that goes into first. We have line chart. We have pie chart. And we have thematic maps. If I want to just start with a bar chart, which we're going to do here today, and we're going to, each of these different document or analysis types have slightly different options, but they also work in conjunction together. So you can actually toggle between the different document types, at least the bar chart, line chart, pie chart types, and it will maintain your settings as far as what you want to look at. And so you can look at the different types of charts and see what might be best to visualize the data you're looking to. So we have a couple of, we really only need to do the series to get a very simplistic look at a chart. I can come in here from the series, and if I just want to look at my free and reduced across the entire data stream, in this case, the student data stream that's loaded, we can get a quick bar chart of our categories of free and reduced, showing our numbers at the end of the chart. So we can just change our different drop downs to get those different charts very quickly off of one variable. We can also use the group drop down to group those by other categories. So if we were interested in looking at our free and reduced population based on ethnicity, we can group them on ethnicity and take a look at what that might look like. We also have the ability, once we have a series and a group, if we want to look at different grouping or visualization options, we can swap. Under our view toggles at the bottom, we can use this swap series and group inputs. Maybe we didn't want to, maybe we wanted to group it by free and reduced and take a look at it that way. So we have the quick ability to just swap those axes. We also can take a look at different output options. Right now, we're using the current vintage. By default, it's going to use the current vintage if you come in from scratch. Again, but we could change, and I talked about those different types of vintages. We could change it to using our school years, a monthly vintage, again, which would also contain your monthly snapshots, or scenario vintages from Planner. So you have a lot of control over which vintage you're using. And in the output, depending on what variables you're looking at, if you're doing a single vintage with some variables, you'll have an option to have the output be student count or the group share percentage. If I toggle into a multi-vintage bar chart, there will be additional options which we'll take a look at. But prior to getting into that, I want to show that we have our optional filters, both spatial and attributes. These are set up, again, just like they were in Explorer, where you have the same exact functionality. We can come into our dialog. Maybe we're just interested in looking at school type of elementary school. We can click finish, and now our chart will update to reflect a filtered set. Again, we can toggle between filtered and unfiltered mode very quickly with the slider to the left of that. And we have our configure or current filter settings dialog that can be used as well. To spatially filter, we have a new button that says Edit Spatial Filters. This is where it's important that all the functionality we learned in Explorer from a mapping perspective now exists in Advisor to allow us to select a subset of geography to use in our charts that we're creating. So again, we can come in here, we could use our advanced tools to select by area, or we could do our ad hoc drawing tools. And we've got some tool tips that come up to help you in the process. So I'll draw just a simple polygon. What we'll notice in here now is that we've got a selection, and on the left-hand side, we can see that we have a red highlighted box around that tool, which is telling us when we highlight to finish, click it to finish editing the spatial filter. This will bring us, as this icon shows, back to the bar chart. So now this bar chart, the numbers are reflecting both the spatial attributes we filtered on as well as the characteristics that we had selected.
And I'm just going to pause on that for a second, Dan. This to me is one of the coolest things about Advisor, because to me Advisor is the ability to analyze data that I might want to look at in an Excel spreadsheet, but I don't have to do formulas, I don't have to do pivot tables, but the ability to be able to look at a bar chart, filtering from easy selections and then mapping that, or selecting neighborhoods or areas and then using that data set to bounce back to make pie charts and graphs is just a really unique functionality of Advisor that I think is really powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, so again, I went into the map again and showed that we can use our advanced options. Maybe we just wanted to look at this attendance area in our analysis based on the free and reduced. And again, we can change our drop downs and map any variables we want to in our series and our group. So you have a lot of flexibility. I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to go ahead and clear the geometry selections, as well as use the clear all to get rid of our characteristics. Well, we're back to the full data set. And we're going to take a look at the multi-vintage options available. So again, we can continue to use a variable, and we can add our vintages or years into this analysis. Say we had, or your district had historical vintages loaded in GuideK12, had some annual school year snapshots. We could come in here and select 1, 2, 3, or all. In this case, I'm going to grab all of them. And to get these vintages, again, to see what you have for options, you click in the dialog to select it. If there are available vintages, they will show up when you click. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the school year vintages as well as my current year vintage. And I'm going to put them on the bar chart. And I actually want to take a look at this, and I want to group them the other way. Now I can take a look at a very intuitive graphic. One thing you'll notice here is our current in our demo is actually our 15, 16 years. So you will not see any change from that. But I kind of wanted to show you how you could use the current compared to previous vintages, and to take a look at the different output options that we now have available to us. So we can see, again, we've got our raw counts, and we're grouping still by free and reduced. Again, we could change this to special ed if we want to. And then we now have some different output options available to us. Besides just the student count that we looked at in our group share percentage, we now have a change from a previous vintage. This will give us the count change. And so what it's going to do is it's going to be comparing. You'll notice the 11-12 year dropped off because it did not have a previous year to calculate the change against. So we have our 12-13, which has a 407 student decrease in students that are not receiving special ed from the 11-12 year, and so forth. This one, 13-14, is going to compare to the 12-13 year, and so forth. But I think more importantly is to look at the percent change from a previous vintage. So we can change our drop down to choose percent and get a quick representation by year, what percent we are losing or gaining in particular categories. Maybe we're interested again in our transfers, and we want to see if something is massively happening on a transfer perspective from year to year. And again, once we see that, we could start to go to the map and look at where is that happening on the map, and we'd be able to create that representation of a geographic area and start to really hone in on where are these transfer issues occurring geographically. The last piece down here on the view toggles that I haven't talked about yet is also we can show the data table associated to the bar chart. So the data table is here, and we're able to then output that data from the table as well as the bar chart. So let's look at what we can do with our analysis. And to hide the data table, we simply click that data table button again, and that will close our data table and get us back to just the bar chart. And again, what you'll notice here is, so if I'm in a category and if I don't want to, maybe I don't want to look at all the categories, maybe I don't care about the unknown locations or transferring into district, I could come in here and simply filter for just those I want to show. And now we're going to get a bar chart just showing those categories that I selected in the filters. Output options. This first button will allow us to either save a link to the document, which means if you wanted to save this link to come back to at a later time, you could copy it as well. But more importantly, I think you could use this to email and share with other advisor users in the district. If you found something interesting and wanted to share that with somebody, as long as they have access to GuideK12 Advisor, they would be able to take this link and click on it. It would come up in the exact place where you saved the link from. We also can clone the document to a new tab. So if you wanted to leave this analysis up and move on to another one that just maybe has slight variations, you can clone it. It will open a new tab and start you off from that exact location. We can output the results. There's a couple of results that are missing from here. We have in final phases, we're just about to release it. We have some graphic output options that will be available soon that will allow you to export the chart itself. Right now, you'll see that you can do the results in Excel or CSV. That'll output the data table with these options. Again, you'll have an option to output the chart graphic shortly here once that is put into the code. To let you all know, you are our first wave of customer upgrades, so that's why that chart graphic just had a little bit of a, Internet Explorer was having some interesting things to say about outputting charts, so we're just finishing that up and it will be available shortly. Having mentioned that, we do support all major browsers. We do recommend, you may have heard this in the past, I like to tell people use Chrome or Firefox if you can, if you're in a PC environment. Safari, I've not known any issues. Edge works very well also. It's Internet Explorer where we tend to have some of those versions because they're getting so outdated now and old and have compatibility issues with the way they were created. There's just more issues that could crop up. So I recommend the other browsers prior to Internet Explorer.
And on that, Dan, there were some questions of somebody not being able to see their dots, and the recommendation on that was to go into one of those other browsers using Edge or Chrome or Firefox and just clear your settings and see if that helps the dots reappear.
Yes, you do the clear my settings at a worst case. Certainly make sure you're looking at your overlays dialog to make sure you have your filter overlays for the dot distribution map. Make sure that is toggled on prior to doing any drastic measures. But yes, clearing your settings should hopefully clear that up. And that may be the case for those of you who have had Explorer up for a little longer time here while we've actually had some code changes. Okay, so that essentially wraps up our bar charts. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the line chart. And what you're going to notice here is that it did keep, even though there are less options in a line chart, it has kept actually both variables. Now we have the series which transfers over. We still have our transfer status. And it's maintained, you can see across the x-axis on the bottom, it has maintained our vintages that we chose. So we're now looking at a line chart representation of what's happening from a transfer status perspective. And again, we have the same options. We can come down here and we can take a look at our different variables. Now we're just in line chart mode. And we can choose vintages as well. So some of the interactive pieces at this time in the line charts is if we hover over the left-hand side, it highlights the line on the chart associated to that legend variable. Your output options, again, are your student count and your series share percentage. Certainly if you're experiencing not seeing certain things in your instance, if you're looking at your instance when following along as doing this, certainly jot those down and get us an email after this training. We'll get that to our technicians to take a look at any potential issues that might be related to the actual conversion and stand-up of your product rather than a browser issue. I've seen a couple of comments come across, so I'll just point that out. This is the first time you're seeing your new instances, and if there's something that doesn't look right, let us know. There may be a configuration issue we need to still tweak on that, and certainly let us know via email. You can email us at service@GuideK12.com, or if you've got other contacts you've worked with at GuideK12, such as me or Jim Spoden or Carrie Shaw, feel free to email them directly as well. In the line chart option, again, we still have our optional filters and our view toggles, which allow us to show the data table associated to the chart data. Same output options available with this as well. Now we're going to switch over to pie charts. And you can see here, pie charts are not going to be able to show multiple vintages or years. It's simply a single variable charting tool. So we're going to be working with what are called slices now rather than a series or a group. So in this case, we can see I have free and reduced. Again, we can change that to be whatever variable we want to take a look at, including, again, any of your custom attributes you might have. And now we have a vintage chooser again, where again, now that we can only choose one vintage, we have to choose a single vintage to take a look at. Again, I'll show I can use a scenario vintage from a planning vintage or scenario that I've created. And we can change between the count and group share percentage for our output options. We do have the ability to choose vintages, years in our slices. It's simply going to allow us to take a look at total enrollment numbers over those vintages. And we can click on a slice to pull that slice out for the interactive side of things. Another thing to point out is with all of the different analysis types, at the top, you'll notice that it's going to give us an auto title. So as I select a variable, that's going to change, and my subtitle is going to show us what we're filtering on. Again, these are done automatically, and I certainly recommend leaving them there. They're very useful in knowing, again, what your document is doing at the time. But you can double click. If you hover over each of those, they are separate title lines. There's a main title and a subtitle. If you double click, you can actually put in your own title for the analysis, or subtitle for that matter. But they will auto-populate based on your filters and your variables that you're working with. Remember, again, you can switch to different data streams. It essentially loads that other application. They are actually separate applications with different options for creating based on the configured attributes for that data stream. Okay. Julie, is there anything else about Advisor that you want to add on or talk about?
No, I just encourage you to play with Advisor. It's a very, very powerful tool. And as Dan switches over to Planner, I just also want to emphasize that part of how Advisor came to life or to being was that for districts that were working on scenarios, they wanted to be able to visualize some of the reports that are in Planner. And so that was kind of the start or the seed that was planted that started Advisor. And once we started working on it, it really grew into an even more robust tool. So I just want to encourage you to play with Advisor and start to look at it. And as you're doing boundary planning, those two modules really do interact very well together. On the scenarios that you save in Planner, you'll find an Advisor and be able to do comparisons against with your scenario or current year, and that's pretty powerful to be able to quickly see the impact of some changes. So and we're excited about how much easier Planner is and how much more intuitive it is for those that are going through boundary changes. So I'll let Dan kind of explain that. And I was just going to add one other thing is when you got your email from Amy reinforcing kind of the or sending out the link for today and just a reminder for today's meeting, there were some attachments, and hopefully you had a chance to look at those attachments because it is highlighting some of just the basic functionality of each of these modules. And please feel free to let us know what questions you have as you are working on it, because we are working on help sites and more Q&A, FAQ kind of things. So if you're finding areas that you aren't getting answers on, we'd love to know that so we can continue to add that to the help site to help others as we go through the training and through the transition.
Yeah, that's perfect to note that, Julie. In fact, in regard to the new help site, I'm going to let you know where that is today. it's a knowledge-based type site where we're constantly adding new content all the time, but it's got enough content on it right now to get you started. It's got a getting started section for all of the products, and I'll let you know where that site is at the end of the training here today. And there will be soon, we will soon have links directly inside of the applications to that help site as well. So again, and also we're collecting your any of your comments or questions that you're putting in the chat window are being logged. And so if we don't get a chance to respond them, if Julie's not responding to right now on the fly, we will certainly be looking at those and can respond to those after the training today. So we kind of left off, but we showed you Advisor, and I wanted to show you and teach you Advisor 1. We're very excited about it, and we feel there's a lot of new uses throughout the district. In particular, I am excited for just quick access to the reporting features and to be able to use in your administrative team reports or board member reports that you're doing on a monthly basis, or maybe it's a weekly basis to your teams, that you can quickly create those charts and put them into presentations much faster. We've had a couple of districts here recently say, hey, we're gonna put off this big annual board presentation until we get your product, because we're going to be able to save dozens of hours compiling this data and putting it into the presentation. So a real good opportunity again to, step back from what you're used to GuideK12 being used for on the mapping side, and also say it can be used more administratively on a more frequent basis from a reporting perspective. And it makes it very compelling when we get into Planner, how you'll be able to create very customized reports. All of you who have used Enrollment View in the past know that we could output multiple scenario reports, but they were on separate pages. They weren't able to be looked at side by side. Planner still contains those canned reports and some improvements on those reports, but we also now, again, allow Advisor to be really the primary reporting tool for creating those graphics and those data tables based on multiple vintages that you can look at different scenarios side by side. So without further ado, I'm going to get into Planner and take a look at, again, what the differences are, what we've done differently and streamlined in the new version of Planner over Enrollment View. So as you can see, when we come into Planner, it basically looks like Explorer, and really at this point, it is. In fact, Enrollment View used to come up with a dialog box, our scenario builder, where you had to create a scenario to do anything in there. Well, we've removed that. You can literally use Planner now as Explorer with pre-filtered views without creating a scenario. So you can see in here, we've got a slightly new interface where we've got our changes dialog up here, but it wouldn't allow me to make any changes until I create a scenario. But I can come in and work with the filters and be able to do that. And what we'll notice now is, just like your Enrollment View product, we are pre-filtered so that you don't have to filter out students that are on different levels that you're not concerned about in the planning process. So you'll see we're filtered on elementary students since school type is set to elementary. If I switch it to middle, you're going to see that we're going to switch over to middle, and since I didn't have middle school grade selected, we don't have any students. But if I had a middle school attribute, you would see that it automatically would filter on those students when we switch our levels. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the elementary level, and I'm going to start a scenario. All of the options for scenarios now are up here under the scenario options dropdown. So there isn't a scenario builder dialog any longer. We're trying to simplify that. We can come in here and either create a new scenario or open an existing. I'll just show you that if I did open an existing, we've got a history here of the scenario name, the base vintage it uses, who created it. That's a very important difference between Enrollment View and Planner now. Previously, if you recall, everybody that had an administrative access to Enrollment View could see all scenarios. Now scenarios are created at the user level and they're maintained as being only accessible to that user that created it until you choose to share it. So it's going to tell us who the creator is, when we modified it, and when it was created. If I wanted to open it, I would highlight the scenario I want and click on open. I'm going to go ahead and cancel, as I'm going to create a new scenario. To create a new scenario, simply we need a title. Just going to call it webinar training, and we would choose a base vintage to work with. You're used to seeing your monthly vintages as well as your current vintage being in there. So we'll be able to choose from a base vintage and click create. There's a lot more that goes into the dialogue showing you things are processing and if things were successful. In the past, there had been times where Enrollment View might have a little bit of a hiccup and you'd get that pink screen of death, or some geography change when you tried changing a boundary to another school wouldn't quite finish completely. We have made that much better. We have fixed all of those geometry problems to where they can resolve themselves now, and it will tell you when you're successful or not with a change. So now we've moved into a new scenario. We've taken a copy of our base vintage of not only the student data, but also the base vintage of the boundaries for that matches with that base student vintage. And we can see some additional options besides our summary attributes that we have. We also now have what used to be in the bar chart capacity and economic indicators. We've kind of moved some things. We no longer have that bar chart down on the bottom. Advisor replaces the bar chart indicators, but we've put in a capacity indicator so that you can dynamically quickly see if you're over or under and what the percent of capacity you are. And you're able to expand and contract these areas as needed to be able to see them. So we have a capacity, which is a student capacity indicator, as well as your racial or ethnicity balance and students of color. It will show you the count of the students of color as well as the percent breakdown. And again, that's dynamic and will change as we're making changes. We also, again, have the map by still down in the bottom. Again, all of your functionality from Explorer ports over to Advisor's mapping component and Planner as well. I'm going to go ahead here and we're going to make a simple change. So this scenario is going to assume a boundary change where we're not adding a new school or closing a school. We're simply going to make a change to an area. So just like Enrollment View, you'll use your drawing tools. And again, you can either select from features already on the map if you have them. If you're a district that has neighborhood polygons, for example, you could use your neighborhood polygons with your advanced tools to click on those neighborhoods and change them from one school to another. If not, you've got your ad hoc drawing tools. I'm going to use the draw polygon tool in this case. And I'm just going to define an area that I want to move from one school to another. So I've identified an area in Norris Elementary, south of this Highway 610, that I want to move to Calderon Elementary. We're going to draw my polygon. Again, in this case, for simplicity, I'm just going to move all the students. There's 34. But again, if we wanted to protect transfers and not move transfer students, we could use our filters to filter out just who we want to be able to work with and move. Very flexible still with that. We've got our change button up here in the changes section. You can also notice we do have undo last change and redo last change. They are part of the changes history. So again, these redos over on the map will do the drawing features. These undo and redos will have to do with the previous actual change of assignment. And we have a change history dialog that we'll be able to view once I make a change. So I'm going to click the change button, which brings up our change dialog. We have some different options now, which we've streamlined a little bit. You might notice the one that's noticeably missing is the change to a non-level school. So if we're looking to do grade level reconfiguration, where we need to move students from one level to another, now that simply is under the student assignments option. What happens there is now we have, if we're just doing it, if we're doing student zones or assignments and zones, we can only access the zones from the level we're working on, similar to what is currently in the enrollment view product. If we click on the student assignments, this is where we can do grade level reconfiguration. Now our drop down is going to list middle schools and high schools as well, and other schools that we can move them to, basically giving you access to move them to any level. The zones option comes into play if you are a district who has detailed walk zone data that you might want to manage in the scenario and look at changing your walk zone distances as well. If I click in the zone types, you can see here in our demo, we have two options. The default is attendance. We also can do other zone types in scenarios now. So that's an addition to the new product. And as usual, we can send students home. I'm going to leave it at the default, and I'm going to put in a summary. Again, you want to give a description of the change you're making, and I'm going to say this is Norris Elementary to Calderon, south of Highway 610. And you could put a very detailed description in this if you wanted to even be more specific about if you were filtering certain characteristics out on this change or not. This all helps you to remember what you did previously, so you can actually undo it if you want to as you go through this scenario. So I'm going to click Make Change, and we're going to see very quickly that it says success. It'll actually make us click the success button to dismiss it, so we know we were successful. That will remove. And we can see now, oh, I didn't, of course, it would be helpful if I chose Calderon Elementary. So let's show the undo. I'm going to undo the last one. And go in and make the right change so I can choose Calderon. And I'm going to go ahead and make that change. Now we're seeing that I've got the same color boundary and the students have been reassigned to Calderon. If I look at my view edit history or change history, we're actually going to see two things now. We're going to see one, which I undid, and it's highlighted in blue, was that first change, and now it's showing that I undid it by highlighting it in blue and saying that 0 students were affected because it's been undone. But the second change shows that I affected 34 students, and I could choose to undo it in this history as well. I'm going to do some capacity option changes to show you how that's managed now. We have a capacity options in the scenario options dialog or drop down, where we can now choose the school that we want to look at. Say we had the wrong capacity in here and it was actually 800. We can go ahead and change it in this scenario. It still only affects this scenario. We could also change class sizes by individual school now. So you have more granularity at the individual school level to change your classroom sizes for reporting in your capacity report. I'm going to click Save, and we're going to see that that actually is a change history item as well. So it's going to let us know that we made a change. As we keep making more and more changes, we now can have the ability to go back to a previous point in time and undo that change. I'm going to do one more quick change. I know we're starting to run up against time here, so I want to make sure I show this because it's a very important feature that a lot of customers were looking forward to having, is that, hey, if I wanted to go back and remove a change 5 changes ago but not affect everything after it, Now we can do that. In the old product, you could not do that. It had to undo everything up to that point or back to that point. So I'm going to do another quick change here. And it doesn't matter what I change it to for this purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and just make that change. Now we're getting more change history. I'm going to say I wanted to undo this first change I did, but I still wanted to keep my other changes after it. It's a two-step process we have to do, but we can do it. So you'll notice it says undo change. So I'm going to undo and reset to before this change. It's going to go ahead and put things back to where it was at that point. And then I can bring my history back up here. And now it's giving me options to redo changes. And if I want to go from the capacity change I did forward, I can click on my redo change and I can choose whether I want to redo this only or this and all following. So I'm going to choose the latter option. That's going to get me back to having removed basically a line item I didn't want to keep, but I've kept everything else after it. So keep in mind, it's a two-step process. And the change dialog or history dialog will show you what you've changed, where there's been students affected, and which ones you've undone, and keep that history.
Dan, one of the questions that's come in is, can you talk about if people have layers developed in their vintage version for a current boundary change, what they do from their old version to get it into this new map, or if they've got other boundaries that they want to bring forward, how do they do that?
So there's a process that goes along with that. Your current boundaries in your applications always are for the current year, but we can add overlays for future years. So if you've got, say you're planning for boundaries for the 2018-19 year, you'd let us know once you're done with those approved plans. You could let us know what those scenarios, that scenario is that has those boundaries, or provide us with the export from it, and we'll clean up the boundaries. As you know, we've talked about this before. I have in my trainings with the customers, and hopefully you're aware that when you create boundaries in Enrollment Viewer Planner, they're not always clean. So we need to clean them up topology-wise and make sure there aren't any slivers or gaps, and that they look and are very accurate. And so we'll clean them up, and then we'll, depending again on what the situation is, we can put them into a future school search application so that you can have not only your current lookup, but you can have a future year. And we combine them into one application if you like, which is really the recommended way now, so that a user can simply take a radio button and toggle between the year for a particular address or location and see what the schools are right in the same application. Also, we can add those as overlays then. So say you want to be able to use those as overlays in Explorer for future boundaries for next year in your current year Explorer application, we'll load them as overlays for you if that's what's needed. So you would just need to let us know which layers you want to take from there, and we'll do the rest of the work for you. Hopefully that will answer your question.
Thanks, Dan.
You bet. Getting back to what I really want to do again, and we're running down to the last 5 minutes. We're going to run right up to the full 2 hours. So hopefully everybody's getting a lot of good value out of this. And most importantly here with Planner, I want to show the reporting, some reporting options that are still available, as well as the interaction with Advisor. So while there's also options to create a school, add a school or close a school, just like in Enrollment View, you'll still be able to do that in here. One of the most asked for features that we've incorporated is the copy this scenario. What that allows you to do is, before we could make a copy, but we could not change the vintage of student data. So if we did planning in October and wanted to check it 6 months later against the newest student data in a highly mobile district, that might be what you want to do. We can now copy that, and we can choose a different base vintage, and it will rerun the scenario. with the new vintage of student data. So no longer do you have to manually recreate those vintages or call us for assistance. You can do it yourself very easily by copying the scenario with a new base vintage. But the reporting, I'm going to open this in Scenario and Advisor. Now, when your instances, they should go right to Advisor. I'm going to open this. If I open this from here, it should do what I want to do. You're going to see it would have gone directly into your Advisor, and it would bring the scenario as well as the base vintage of that scenario right into a bar chart. The idea behind this is that you can use Advisor while you're making scenario changes. If you've got multiple monitors, you can have Advisor on one, Planner on the other. We can make a change. The quickest change for me is to undo a change, so I'm just going to undo something here to show you that they do talk to each other. Okay, I've undone that change, and I'm going to go back to Advisor, and Advisor is going to tell me that it has been refreshed due to a scenario change because Advisor had a scenario open that I was actively working on. So it will be communicating with Planner and know when you've changed a scenario, and it will automatically refresh your bar chart. And again, it comes in by default and will put up your base vintage and compare it to where the scenario vintage is at that time. So a great example of using this, once you're done with your final 3 examples and you want to create presentations for, again, administrative teams or the community or the board, you'd be able to go in here and select scenario ABC and create your different demographic charts or data tables that you want to, getting side-by-side representation now of those results. Again, Planner has some canned reports still. So for exports, we're able to come in and look at the different reports. I encourage you to look at those reports in your instances, and let us know if there's any issues with those reports. But essentially, the reports are all redone to have more pertinent information. They are all in Excel format. The feedback we got was extremely overwhelmingly toward just doing Excel and that the PDFs. So the PDFs are not an option anymore. They were static anyway and not very useful. So everything is going to Excel format for you to work with those inside of there. A demographic trend report, which is different from before, allows you to choose vintages. Again, that's where you would be able to take a look at your scenario vintages if you wanted to do a multi-vintage trend report on the demographics of your ESL, special ed, and so forth. And the other export options are still the same. We have you can output your boundaries for the scenario into a GIS format, as well as the map image and map legend.
And that was a fast view of Planner. A lot of the functionality is very similar to Explorer, but yeah, please let us know if you have questions along the way and how we can help. Dan, is there anything else? We're at the top of the hour, and I really appreciate everybody's attention and the questions that have come in, and hopefully we've been able to answer those on the fly. But if there's anything remaining, either Julie at GuideK12.com or Dan at GuideK12.com, and we'd be happy to answer them. Anything else, Dan?
Yeah, just as usual, you all know, you have my information, you have our team's information. Service at GuideK12.com is a general address you can always send to that will make sure somebody sees. Important ones should go to service at GuideK12.com. If it's an urgent issue, that makes sure we can triage it appropriately. But here I'm putting up on the screen our help site. It's simply help.guidek12.com. And again, it's going to be growing in volumes, I would say, over the next week or two, even yet, as we add more and more content. But as we go into here, into each section, you're going to be able to see that we've got the products detailed, and we've got getting started sections, as well as how-tos and frequently asked questions. So feel free to get started in there using our help site, and know that more content is coming all the time within there. And thank you again for everyone's time, and I hope you got some value out of our training today.
Thanks so much, everybody. Great job, Dan. Thanks
Bye,
so much.
everyone.